welcome to Longer Tables. Marcus, I'm so happy to have you with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I love Longer Table. That's a great title.
Yep, we couldn't come with a better one. Longer Tables is something I know, I believe, but I know you believe in it even more than anybody I know, my friend. Longer tables, not high walls. You know, right now I'm talking to you from this very beautiful place in the south of Spain, in a little town. My daughters don't want me to tell anybody because they are afraid everybody will come. I don't blame them from being a little bit selfish. Mm-hmm. But when I told my three daughters I was going to be talking to you today, they were so happy. Like, can you say hi to Marcus? We love Marcus.
Oh, I love them too. And
everybody loves Marcus. I love Marcus Samuelsson.
Well, Jose, I love your family, first of all, and we have so many great memories. But I think just like, for me, the full circle, right? Like one day I was doing this project and I was just working, you just keep working. And then all of a sudden this Carlota Andres is coming up in all the emails. And then after a month, she was driving all the emails. And that's when it dawned on me, oh my God, it's little Carlota, but she wasn't little anymore. She was running with it. She was driving it and she's doing a great job. And just that full circle of watching someone grow up, being in our industry, maybe not the exact same way as you and I entered the industry, but it doesn't matter. She's part of it now. And I'm sorry to say, we're not going to let her go. She's going to be in the industry forever.
It's very amazing, Marcus, because you and I, we know now each other for so long. I remember eating in your restaurant where you were a very young chef in New York, in Aquavit, in the temple of modern Northern Europe Swedish cooking. And the guy that happens was the executive chef, one of the most creative chefs in America. Was one guy that he will call himself a Swedish chef. But when all of a sudden you will see a photo, an image of Marcus, or you will hear his accent, you will say, hold on a second, hold on. America, New York, Manhattan, the melting pot. When anybody ever tells me about the melting pot, which I love, I became a better person, a better cook, only walking through the streets of New York as a young boy. When I think about pot, Marcus always comes to mind. If I will read to you and to all of you listening to us without mentioning who this person was or is, I will tell you about this person that born in Ethiopia, in a tiny village, in a tiny village that is almost in no map. That was a person that was still when a tuberculosis epidemic hit Ethiopia, that his mother walked 75 miles, carrying that little boy on her back with his older sister to a hospital in Addis Ababa. With his walking with his older sister to a hospital in Addis Ababa, the capital, that his mother died when the children survived. That this little boy and his sister, Fantae, were adopted by a Swedish family and then moved to Gotham. This seems is like a movie. This seems is a fascinating story. And I can say that I know the person which this fascinating story is coming from. And this person is you, is Marcus Samuelsson. So tell me, my friend, you were born in Ethiopia, you grew up in Sweden. Tell us all this trip through life from place to place, to a place you're born and moving to a place that kind of you belong, and then moving later on to America. But tell us, what do you remember from those early times in going from one continent to another, in going from one family, a mother you lost, to a family welcome you? Tell us that story, that trip through life.
Well, first of all, even when it's been read to me, it feels unbelievable. The second part I pick up is that I am definitely here because of a couple of things. I was extremely lucky, but also the love of others. And I say that because the nurse in the hospital that actually became the bridge, once we didn't have tuberculosis anymore. We'd been in the hospital for about 2 months. Our mother passed away, as you say. Where are they going to send us? There's thousands of kids that could be, just go back to the streets of Addis. This nurse, Jose, she breaks the law. She takes us in. Single mother, 3 kids of her own. She just decides, I'm going to take these 2 kids. And she just took it upon herself to set us up with a Swedish adoption agency. So that's just the random sort of beautiful power of human touch, right? She said, I'm going to take care of these kids. Second part is really also, it explains how challenging and difficult and loving all complexity around adoption. There is a winner, which is the family and me and my sister. There's also a loser, right? My father is somewhere in the countryside. He lost his wife and he lost 2 kids. And I say that because that's how complex adoption, love, family can be. And I always think that's kind of the basement of my life, because I'm always kind of like, I was raised in that beautiful chaos, right? There's nothing I could do about it. I was like a little package. I was 2.5 to 3 years old. I woke up one morning in Ethiopia, and the next afternoon I was in Sweden. I went from being Kasahunsi guy to Marcus Samuelsson, right? And boom, my life started in Sweden. The biggest thing people always ask about is about race. And I would say that's not the biggest thing. I can tell you the biggest thing. I was surrounded by love. I came into a family that completely loved me. They were in front of me, they were next to me, and they were behind me and my sister. And I will always be forever grateful for that. I've taken my family back, my kids, Zion and my wife, of course, to that village. And Jose, I'll tell you, when you're standing and looking at that hut, you know those big paella pans where you cook with, those huge, the biggest size? Our hut is about twice the size of one of those incredible paella pans. And that's where a family of 4 people lived, right? It gives me the shivers, but it also gives me strength, because I know if I got out of there and got to here, I can go through a lot. I know I can go through a lot.
What's the name of that little village in Ethiopia? What's the name?
It's called Abragodena. Tiny. And Jose, you've been there without you've been there, right? It's, you know how it is when you land in Africa. The clay is red, it's dusty, and it's out in the savannah where you have beautiful animals, dusty cars, maybe some animals, maybe some donkeys. People are working next to the road, and you look to the right, and there might be like 20 huts onto the right-hand side. It's throughout Africa. We've seen it 100 times. It's one of those villages. I would like to say it's a big, spectacular city and so on. It was not. It's just this very simple, off-the-road village, no running water, dusty as you can imagine, and dry. And wow, you know, I actually brought our dear friend Tony Bourdain there once, rest in peace. And Tony was so happy when he was in the village, and he was so upset when we stayed at the fancy hotel with the air conditioning. He couldn't wait to take me to the village and eat some chopped raw tartar that we have in the village. And just it's just this place that I know you know about it, and you know it without even having been there.
So take me back to your adopted mom, your grandma. For what you always told me, they taught you how to cook. You've written that in your memoirs. Tell me about them. Tell me a moment you were cooking with them, or they were cooking for you. What memories you have of those moments?
Jose, what's amazing about your background and my background, Spain in your parents' and your grandparents' generation could have been very, very poor, depending on where you lived and where you grew up. Same with Sweden. People think Sweden is this rich country. And yeah, post Second World War, we were very fortunate and so on. But my grandparents and my parents grew up in poverty. And so our food is rooted in poverty, the food I grew up with, which meant that we grew up on an island. So we ate fish 4 to 5 days a week, right? It was mackerel that we smoked or pickled. It was cod. On a very big day, it could have been halibut tail, because the big piece of the halibut was always sold. We had halibut head soup very often, cod soup. So, almost like very rustic food. Potato was always on the table. In our garden, we didn't have basil and oregano. It was dill, fennel, and chives. But it was cold, but it was also very warm. And our family was very, very warm, right? Imagine every day we ate homemade meals. I never remember going somewhere and buying food. It was roasted cod one day, cod soup the second day, and it could have been like, a broth with chicken dumpling maybe on the third day or something like that. There was always, and watching my grandmother preparing this, because it was very close between my mom's and my parents and my grandparents' house. It was amazing to watch it, actually. And we actually always, most Swedes, middle-class Swedes, had a country home. And that's where my father grew up. And we had a basement where we stored a lot of stuff. And I always asked my grandparents, why are we storing so much food? We had jars and basement full of pickled herring and mackerel. And my grandparents always said, we have to store food far away because one day maybe the Russians will come. And when you're growing up, you don't even know what that means. But thinking about it now, and obviously where you've done so much work, that's how a lot of Ukrainians prepare too. They prepare themselves for one day maybe the Russians would come. And when you're a kid, it sounds so foreign. It sounds like, oh, my parents are just talking about stuff. And now it doesn't sound as foreign anymore. So that's how I grew up. Very warm family in a very cold climate. And I would say most conversations we had happened around the dinner table. And it was about the food that was served or the food we're going to go and make or get or give to our neighbor. That was our lives.
This episode of Longer Tables is sponsored by State Farm. When you get a new car or a new home, the first thing you might find yourself saying is, I cannot believe it, or this is incredible. But what you really want to say is the one thing that can get you the help you need. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. State Farm is there with the coverage you need for your car, your home, and even boats, motorcycles, RVs, and other things that matter to you. With a State Farm agent, you know someone is there to help you choose the coverage you need. With so many coverage options, it feels good knowing you can find what works best for you and your needs. And when you need ways to get help, State Farm gives you options there too. Whether it is in person or on the phone with your local agent or on statefarm.com or on their award-winning app, State Farm lets you do things your way. So when you need help protecting the things that matter most, remember to say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
So for you, this was your early love with cooking, like me, like many others, that our mothers, our grandmothers, fathers, family members, where food is love, where food is a necessity. My mom and my dad will cook every day. I never realized even they were middle class, working class. It's not like we went to restaurants. Going to a restaurant was like a very big important day celebration. Like we'll have to dress. Like, why are we dressing? We're going, and this was not even a restaurant. This was the bar in the gas station that they will have the menu of the day for 500 pesetas. I mean, 500 pesetas is like half a dollar. I mean, it was nothing. Like what is this? And still I remember that moment, like, wow, today we're going to a restaurant, even if it was behind the gas station. But for me, I guess for you, that was the learning. Obviously, going to restaurant was a way to start exploring beyond what was happening in our home kitchens. But obviously, you are a person, since I know you, that as a master you are of the culinary craft, you always you have this amazing willingness to be learning. And you are the type of people that I have a feeling share with me the idea that the more you know, the more you realize you know nothing. And therefore, you are this type of person that is always learning. But going back to your early culinary years, you kind of began going to restaurants to get learnership, and you were in places like Switzerland and Austria. And I would love for you to share with us what was this experience like. And I have even a deeper question. It's difficult sometimes, even in places that we will have a lot of immigration, in this case in Europe, to find chefs that they were, in your case, Black or African or Asian or from any other country. So I'm guessing very early on, you were a minority in those kitchens where you were developing your craft. So I want to know what was for an African man that actually was a Swedish man going into other countries and start getting in the cooking of life. Tell us what was going on in those early days in Marcus Samuelsson lab.
It's such a good question, because we can, as adults now, we can laugh at it. It was very challenging. It started something like this. I tell you, when you're a young teenager, you don't know really where you're going to end up. But I know I had mentors. I was doing weekend jobs in restaurants. And all of a sudden was one guy who's maybe like, I thought he was old, he was maybe 25. He said, "Hey, I'm going to take you to the best restaurant in Gothenburg. You're going to work here one day." And I had like a little job there on the weekends. And then there was a real chef, like, he had a chef jacket on and he just came back from France, and he said, "There is a competition. You can get a scholarship to go to this place in Switzerland. I'm going to help you. But you need a year with me." And I trained with him under a year. And eventually one day, I wasn't thinking about it. He said, "Hey, you got the job. It's an internship at the Great Victoria Jungfrau in Switzerland." My parents loved it because they knew it would be discipline. And for me, it was a great end. And back in those days, you faxed, there was no photography, there was obviously no internet. So Marcus Samuelsson gets the job. And the look when I arrive, it's just this look of awe and shock. Wait a minute, we hired a Swedish guy. What's going on, right? But the shock of me being from Africa or being Black versus the curiosity I had, and I wrote everything down. We were 60 interns that started the season. Every season there was about 30 or 40 that left. and was 20 there by the end of the season. And I just made sure that I would be one of the 20. And I have to tell you, it was probably the next 3-4 years were the most important 3-4 years of my developing life as a young chef, because I knew that before then, I never knew that cooking could be a career. Once I saw it in Switzerland, you start in the garden, then you go into the banquet kitchen, then you go into the entremets station of viande and poisson and all that stuff, but also learned about French and German and so on. And it was exactly the kind of class I needed. In terms of my identity, yeah, it was a trial and error for all of us, you know. It was challenging, but what I have to say about those Swiss chefs, they were equal opportunities. They just didn't yell at me because I was Black or because I was Swedish. They were yelling at all the kids. So at least it made me feel a little bit, you know. My Irish roommate, they yelled at him as well. Our other German roommate, they screamed at him as well. So they were equal opportunities. And it was also a lot of joy, Jose. Yes, it was very difficult. But those craftsmen showed us about terrines, about butchering, how to make cheese. I never been around skills, craftspeople like that. And that gave me the base, because Switzerland wasn't the end stop. My end stop wanted to go to France, a 3-star Michelin place at Georges Blanc. And it gave me the confidence to actually get to Georges Blanc. I also think I was too young or not developed enough to understand fully, how do I deal with me as a young Black African man? I knew, of course, when someone called me the N-word, it hurts, but I couldn't afford to get stuck in that, right? I had to move forward. That was something my parents, they raised me around this constantly, how to get to work, how to get around these obstacles that my parents knew would happen wherever I go. That's nothing to do about Sweden or Switzerland or France. So I knew I had a larger goal, which was to stay and get education. And anytime there was obstacles, I just left. I just went the other way. It hurt, but I knew that I was there for a higher purpose, which was not arguing with this guy in whatever the topic was. You know, I just couldn't afford to get stuck there, you know.
But before you wanted to be a chef, and I know this for a fact, because the reason I said at the beginning of my conversation with you, I told you my daughters were so happy. You began very much establishing a deep connection with my daughters, playing soccer in the Food and Wine Festival that we will go every summer, and will be a happy moment for our families. And before I will turn around, where are my daughters? They will be playing soccer, football, as we call it in Europe, with Marcus Samuelsson. My daughters didn't care about José Andrés, the dad. My daughters only wanted to play football with Marcus Samuelsson. You wanted to be a soccer player. You love soccer. And actually, I can say I've seen your skills. You are very good at football.
Listen, all my life, I still am very connected to soccer. I love it. I probably still even actually manage our kitchen through the way my coach managed it. It's just the love, the teamwork. I also think there's a lot of similarities between kitchen and the soccer field. You both work really hard. It's both teamwork. You feel great when you've had a great sort of service together, or you win against a team. And it's also very humbling. You think sometimes you win a match and you think like, oh, we're so great. And then all of a sudden there's another team over there training just as hard and they can beat you. And it's the same thing with restaurant life. So I miss it. I have a lot of friends still in football, but it's also been something that I could communicate. Food, I communicate all over the world. I'll tell you, the very first day I met my Ethiopian father, the whole village came out. And I couldn't communicate in Amharic because I didn't speak the language. We arranged a soccer match That was our way of saying, hey, the son has come home and we arranged a soccer match. And that's what you do, right? You figure out a way to communicate, which is beyond just like the words. And both football and cooking has taken me around the world. Cooking gives me so much joy, and breaking bread with people, and so has football. I'll tell you a really pivotal moment was actually when Spain hosted the World Cup in 1982, and I was 10 years old, and we watched the Brazilian team, right? Because they played with so much joy, but they didn't win. And it was a big moment. Like my dad said, this is a lesson. People who give you the most joy and pleasure and so on, doesn't always win. And I always thought, like, if you're like playing like Brazil, you will win. But it's tactic. There's like all these other things around it. And it was like a big wake-up point moment for me. But I would say football, soccer, at its best, it breaks barriers. It allows people to talk to one another. And it's beyond religion. It's beyond, at its best, it's really bridges culture. And that's what food does too, which, I never have to tell you because you know it better than anybody.
So football and food, you're telling me, is a language.
It is a language, absolutely.
And I love that you were able to communicate with your dad in the first time you went back to the home you came from. And how old were you when you went back to Ethiopia to meet your dad?
Jose, this happened because of my sister. Just like you in many ways, we leave early in life and we gave everything to food. So you are hanging in there, you're doing your own thing, but life catches up with you, right? And I didn't look for my father. It was my sister who was the curious one who kept on looking. So I think I was even I was probably 28, 29 when that started to happen. And one day my sister said, I found him. She just called me, like, I found him. Let's go. We're going. And I started, like always, when she said something to me, still to this day, I can't, I'm working. Like, it's like a standard. I should have a t-shirt. I can't, I'm working, right? We all should have, chefs knows what I'm talking about. And she's like, listen, we're going, I'm going, we're going. And then I hung up, it's like, she's right. We are going. This is a big deal. And 3 months later, we came to Ethiopia together. We had a translator, a very dear friend of mine with me. And we landed in the big city, Addis. The following day, we were supposed to jump in one of those Toyotas that you've been in, one of those Toyotas that you see in Africa. Right? All over Asia and Africa, you see those cars. And we drive, pick up cars and you drive out. It takes about an hour and a half, and probably fell asleep. My sister, she just looked out the window the whole time. And it's funny, like 30 minutes before we got there, my sister, it's like, wake up, man, you gotta wake up. And you start to see young women carrying water. And every time I saw a woman with 2 kids, I wonder like, wow, is that my mother? Is that how my mother would look? Because she died in her mid-20s. Could that be that you get these random thoughts. And as we get closer to the village, there's a whole group of people. And it's about 70-year-old man with long gray hair. And I said to my sister, it's him. I know that's our father. And as we got introduced, it was him. He stood there with a cane. He was about 70. He had a new family, 8. I have 8 sisters and brother. I don't want to say half sister and brother, but from a deal, he has him he remarried, and a whole other chapter of my life started. And if my sister wouldn't have convinced me, this chapter would have been completely closed. So sometimes it's good to listen to your family, and I'm always grateful to my sister that she pushed me towards that.
So you were 28, 29 when you went back to, in a way, to find who you were, trying to close the 360 degree of who you were.
Yeah.
But let me take you a few years before. You went through the training of life through the kitchen of your family in Sweden. You went to restaurants across Europe. Georges Blanc in the beautiful little town of Bonas, one of the great French chefs that if anybody is looking into an amazing book, you should be looking, even probably it's out of print, the Georges Blanc book, which is one of the amazing culinary French nouvelle cuisine books. But then it's an important moment when you arrived to New York. You were around 23, if I am right.
Yeah.
And you went to work with all the training you got to the place you grew up, that was Sweden. And you went to work to the ultimate Swedish restaurant in America. And you became the executive chef of that restaurant very quickly. I don't know if you arrived as a cook or sous chef, but I remember going to the restaurant, Aquavit, in Midtown Manhattan, and the great Marcus Samuelsson was just one of the chefs that everybody will be talking around in New York. You got 3-star from the New York Times food critic. Who was back in the time? Brian Miller or
no, Ruth Weiss.
No one, but the goddess of food criticism, Ruth Rachel. You became the youngest chef to get this coveted, impossible to get 3 stars from the New York Times. You were an immigrant. I have a feeling you were at the moment in a way more endorsing your Swedish roots. Tell me about that moment, finally manning, being the leader of a kitchen, doing the cooking of the country you grew up. How was it being so young in such a competitive market, probably the most competitive market in the world, maybe putting aside Paris at the time? How was it like for such a young person, a Black person doing Swedish cooking in the heart of New York?
Well, Jose, I'll tell you. First of all, I came as a sous chef. And as an immigrant, as a Black person, you never know when the opportunity is going to come to us. We do know our path, Jose, will never be linear. It will never just be given to you, right? What happened? The chef, he passed away. He died. And it's a very horrible incident that happened, but he died. And I just had arrived 4 weeks, 5 weeks before, and boom, he passes away. And I was very nervous, Jose, because Aquavit was known in Scandinavia in New York. And I said, I don't want to be the person that closes this restaurant. The owner of the restaurant, he said, let me go back to Europe and Sweden and find the chef. And you have to hold it down. And I had a huge support. There was a seasoned sous chef, shout out to Mr. Larry Manheim, that worked for Bobby Flay. He was this ultimate New Yorker sous chef that he knew the fish purveyors. He knew how to hold the cooks down. He knew how to go to CIA to get cooks and all of that stuff. So without Larry's really guidance to me, I knew the food. And I felt completely in tranquility because all I had to do was to cook great food. And at my background, I left my house at 18. I'm 23, going on 24. So with these 6 years, I've been in foreign countries where I've been in Japan, I've been in Austria, I've been in Switzerland, I've been in France. English wasn't even at the table, maybe in Switzerland. But here I could just cook the food that I grew up with at a higher level and to do it in Swedish. And half my crew was Swedish. So I actually felt it was easier to cook in New York City. And the other thing I have to tell you, I also got great mentors. Just to mention some, I want to give a big shout out to Greg Kuntz, the great chef that he was the chef at L'Espinasse. And I wanted to look for things like lemongrass, kaffir lime leaf, and Midtown in New York didn't have that. Gray and John George, because John George had Vong at the time, they knew where to get all of those ingredients from Chinatown. And I've traveled in Asia at that point, so I was like, I need lemongrass for this, I need kalanga for this. So Gray was the one who said, hey, here's my purveyors. Then I had people like Rick Moon, and that told me, here's where you can get the better fish. So I had amazing mentors, and I just started to cook the food that I knew kind of like where I need to go. And it's like you could be in a zone, and I felt like we were we were in the zone for a long time, and it it was an amazing time to come as an immigrant with $300 to run a kitchen in New York, which was premature. I did not know how to manage, but I knew how to cook. And I learned on the job, but I also had great uncles and aunties that really, really helped me. And I remember my time in Switzerland and France. And the one thing I never saw was women in the hotline and people of color. And now being in New York, I'm like, hiring from CIA is competitive. So I went up there and I knew being a young kid, I had a competitive advantage because I was maybe just a year or two older than the students. So I knew I could hire young, eager kids. And I started to hire a lot of young people, a lot of women, a lot of people of color. And that's how we started it. And, you know, we had such a great run in Aquavit. And I would never have the chance to be the person, the chef I am today, without those first 5, 6, 7 years.
Coffee is a requirement for me in the morning. That's why I love my AeroPress. AeroPress is like French press that makes a way better cup of coffee. AeroPress uses a patented 3-in-1 brew technology that combines the flavor benefits of espresso, pour over, and French press into one compact, portable device built for travel. You get a completely unique and delicious cup of coffee wherever you go. Only possible with an AeroPress. AeroPress is shockingly affordable, less than $50, and we've got an incredible offer for our audience. Visit aeropress.com/longer tables. That's aeropress.com/longer tables, and use the promo code longer tables to save 20% off your order. That's aeropress.com/longer tables, and be sure to use code longer tables at checkout to save 20%.
It's fascinating because we always feel like when we are part of the team, and maybe we are the bottom part of the pyramid, that the ones at the top, nobody can substitute them. But this, as you mentioned, football is like a soccer game.
Yeah.
Sometimes the guys coming from the bench are the ones that change the game.
Yes.
In a way, the story you're telling me gives me happiness. I know I love you for many reasons, but you know, I was working also on 55th Street between 5th and 6th at El Dorado Petit. I was a cook. And I kind of became the chef, not because I was prepared.
Yeah.
It's because every other chef went back to Spain. And at the end, I was there manning a kitchen that I maybe was ill prepared to run. But the lesson you are giving me, and I'm sharing with you in my other experience, is that we are always more ready to raise to the occasion and the difficult moments that we think. So anybody listening to us, just listen to this story of Marcus. You are more prepared than you ever think you are. You must be your biggest fan. You must believe in yourself, because sometimes, not because anybody is mean, but sometimes you are not going to see fans cheering you on the sidelines like happens in a football game. So become your best cheerleader, becomes the person that believes in yourself more than anybody, because you are everything you got. But I want to keep going on. Obviously, the mark you made on Swedish cooking, where everybody was talking about, and if Swedish cooking has a big name in America, is not in a small part because the work you did so many years ago. But then obviously you mentioned, and I'm trying to connect here restaurants. I'm trying to connect here the time that went from leaving Aquavit and making a mark on Swedish cooking to then, I don't know why, ending in Harlem on the Red Rooster, and going from Swedish cooking, the country that welcomed you, the roots of the family that adopted you, and that visit to your father and back to Ethiopia, reconnecting your life. And then I have a sense here seeing a person that was searching who he was, how he could even make more meaningful input, not just by cooking for the few, but cooking in a way to tell a story. In a way, sometimes when I read the stories of Hercules Posse or James Hemmings, the early Black chefs, that more credit needs to be given to them and so many others that are unknown and unmentioned. But I see you in so many ways, like James Hemmings went with Thomas Jefferson to France, and he learned, well, you didn't go from America, you went from Africa to Sweden, you ended in France, you learned, like James Hemmings itself, you ended in America. You didn't only brought Swedish cooking to America. Swedish cooking was already in America, but you made this big impact in saying Northern European cooking is here. But then you have all this total change, going to see your father, opening Red Rooster, and reconnecting to your African roots through African American cooking. Tell me that this is something like happens very consciously, or just happened one day at a time. How was that moment? Because to me, it's something I wanted to ask you, always wanted to ask you, and I never did. And now I feel like, what happened there? How was that moment, that trip, to you reconnecting in such a powerful way the different continents you belong to?
Wow, that's a great question. And I can tell you, because you're a dear friend of mine, I'll tell you a couple of things happened. In the mid-90s, 96 or so, the great Charlie Trotter used to come to Akbadit. And he always said, I'm going to mentor you. You need help. You can come to my kitchen, or you can send anyone to my kitchen. And Charlie used to have, as you know, these incredible events where Ferran Adrià was invited, or Tatsuya. You met the world chef through Charlie Trotter. And he did an incredible job. And every time I came to Chef Trotter's kitchen, he always worked with inner city kids that were helping out in the kitchen. And he said, Marcus, whenever you get a chance, you have to help your community. I don't know what charity it's going to be, but you have to start something. He didn't want to answer the question for me. He just put it out there. And like a great mentor, that's really, it's not his puzzle to solve for me. He challenged me to solve it, search for it. I met the great Leah Chase that cooked until she was 95, and she still has a wonderful restaurant. Dookie Chase, her family runs it for over 80 years in New Orleans. She says, Marcus, she always said to me, you have to push. You are now in Midtown, and for us to have a Black chef thriving restaurant in Midtown, you have to make sure you hire from our community, and you have to lead the way. She always pushed me for this. Then I met at the same time Patrick Clark before he passes away in 98. We always talked about how come there's not more Black chefs in fine dining. And we had many good discussions back and forth on this. And I was very young, so I listened, but I was like, what can I do? We'll go up to early 2000. So I meet my father, connect me back to Africa in a deeper meaning. But also, right after that, 9/11 happens. And the combination of starting to ask myself these questions, growing up, going from a young boy to a chef and to a man, and saying to myself, I'm going to stay in New York after 9/11. You have to do something meaningful, true meaningful, not just serving the 1% or the 1% or whatever that we do in high-end restaurant. And that for me became really the call out. So I moved to Harlem. I learned about the community. I started to study at Schaumburg. I started to study the Black food experience, not just in America. And it was really there that I started to find myself. I'm like, wow, I have a job to do here. But it took me 8 years between moving to Harlem and opening Red Rooster because I didn't think I was ready. But also once we opened, I knew that we had a purpose that was bigger. The other thing it gave me, Jose, was also a lifelong, you've done it conceptually. You've opened Middle Eastern restaurants. You've opened fine dining Spanish restaurants. You opened a Mexican Chinese inspired restaurant. Not because you're saying to the world, I'm the expert in all of these cuisines, but because you're curious. And I want to show that Black food is not monolithic. And my experience as a Black chef could be very different than someone from the migration, could be someone different than somebody from Jamaica. And I really want to show that in Red Rooster, with being in Harlem, a block away from the Apollo, on Malcolm X Boulevard, what bigger responsibility and opportunity was it to communicate that, here is Black food today. It has many different rivers to it. And we wanted to celebrate and honor the culture, but it also gave me a life in terms of cooking that we all look for, that it's not just about the food. It's about the totality of the experience with the music, with the art when you come to Red Rooster. And it's actually giving me, I feel sometimes as chefs, especially as fine dining chefs, you can be trapped. And it's almost like the stars becomes the trapping. We're not allowed, we're afraid of trying different ingredients. It's giving me so much energy to go in a different direction. And it's funny, everything comes to a circle. As I'm speaking to you, mid-September, I'm opening a new restaurant in Chelsea. It's going to be mostly seafood. It's almost like going back full circle. Half of the name is Swedish, half of the name is Ethiopian. So it's full circle back.
I always say that restaurants, more than businesses, for people like you and I, they are stories. And our stories of the things we learn, but sometimes, very often, we try to tell the stories of the people we meet on the road. For me, restaurants are just a way to express myself in the way painters paint faraway places. I know will always be the conversation about cultural appropriation. Why Jose has to open a Mexican restaurant? Well, I'm doing it because I want to tell that story, because the time I spent in Mexico, years, and for me, I think you are in so many ways the ultimate storytelling. You're telling the story of people. It's beyond ethnic. It's just people. It's stories of the past that sometimes are forgotten, or that they don't even help us make us think who we are today, or try to understand really who we are. For me, I think was very important in 2019, because I have to thank you in ways you don't even. Very often, obviously, with the different NGOs that all of us, is so many food people. I clap at the food people of America. I clap at the food people of the world, because it seems every single person working in food business always find their way to contribute to the local communities. It's so many ways to do that. It's people that teach inmates in different jails about cooking, so when they leave the jail, they can have a job in a restaurant, or people that feed children in the schools, or people that go to emergency. It's so many ways to contribute, because very much food touches everything. But I remember we were in Miami together, and because the work I began doing with World Central Kitchen, the teams at World Central Kitchen will always be asking me, talk to other fellow chefs, and let's try to be proactive in bringing people more than inactive, meaning when an emergency happens, let's see who shows up. The good news is that always everybody shows up. But when we began doing this gathering, to inviting some friends and bringing them to try to tell them, this is what we're doing. I hope we will never need you, but if one day your community needs help, we are here to help you, because actually we cannot make it happen without you. Me, sometimes, I'm not gonna lie to you, I felt, I don't know, I like to talk, but sometimes I don't feel like telling
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it, but you gave me a real sense of maybe why this was important,
Yeah.
because few months later, the pandemic happened. And who was the first person, first restaurants that joined in helping their community in the middle of the pandemic, especially in difficult neighborhoods, in different places, in this case, Harlem? Well, this was you, Marcus, and this was Red Rooster. And for that, I thank you, because you gave me now the sense that I don't miss an opportunity ever to talk to anybody. And I remember what you told me, like say, oh, Jose, actually, I left that meeting thinking, Jose is full of baloney. He didn't tell us how to help, because I know people ask me and I tell them, I don't know how you can help. You will know when it happens. And in a way, everything came full circle to me.
It did.
Because I didn't even have to call you. You were already cooking for your community on the spot, not only in Harlem, not only in New York, but also in Newark, and taking a leading role. Tell us, because for me, that was beautiful to see in how you did it, how many others did it. But I was so amazed to see the quickness, how fast, and how impactful it was in the lives, not on the people only in the neighborhoods, but also the people working with you. Last time I was in Red Rooster, I left crying, because I gave a long hug to every single member of the team.
Knows. Yeah.
That you had the entire African diaspora in that restaurant, and the vibes was so amazing. And I think that you gave them the opportunity to respond to their communities, gave them a bigger sense of why restaurants are more than just a business. Restaurants are community.
What was it that time, right? I always say that, and you said this before too, World Center Kitchen gave me so much more than I can ever give to World Center Kitchen. But it's a name, and you are my friend. So sometimes you see a big name, and World Center Kitchen now is a big name, but I needed the person. So when I called you, when you said, we know how to serve, we have masks, we know safety. And again, you have to go back to that time at, February, end of February, beginning of March, 2020, those were things that people did not know how to do this. And when I say World Center Kitchen gave us something, it gave us our identity back. Every day I woke up and my team, and we had a purpose. We couldn't sit inside and watch the news and be intimidated and in fear, because we actually have to put the gloves on and put our mask on and go to work. And I needed, the first weeks of the pandemic, I was in shock. Our dear friend Floyd Cardos had passed away. End of February. It was shocking to me, shocking to a lot of big friends of ours. And my wife's like, you have to get out of the house. You have to do something, Marcus. You can't just sit in like this. I was upset. Why is this happening? What is going to happen to my family? But once we started to serve 200 people a day, 500 people a day, 800 people a day, the line got longer and longer, it gave us a purpose. And the word restaurant means to restore your community. And I always think about that. Red Rooster, as we're going to continue, it served on the good day. We served the president of the United States. We've served people at all kind of aspects. But this was our purpose. We became more than a restaurant. And it was, in a hindsight, because we had a partner like you and World Center Kitchen. And that level of dignity to have a place. And you know this because you serve people like this all over the world. People who line up to get a meal, they are your customer, just like a lawyer, a banker, or a doctor is your customer when you open for regular service. And people who come back as regulars, they're going to talk to you. Hey, I like the gumbo you served yesterday. We got apples yesterday. How come you're not giving me apples today? You can start to have real dialogue, And like the chicken you guys did the other day was better than the one you served 2 days ago. And we started to have this sense of pride, like, oh, I'm going to show this guy. So, we started to write menus. We started to treat it just like we would have a full dining room. And in all the craziness that was going on and what's going on, and I knew Harlem's going to be impacted by this very, very heavily, not just through food, through drugs, through violence, through many different things. But those 4 to 6 hours gave me something that was bigger than just food. And I thank you for that opportunity, Jose. And it allowed me to build, right? To get my confidence back and to continue. I just, before we leave, I just want to end on a story, Jose, that is just pure joy, pure chef joy. I don't know if this is 99 or 2000. I don't know. It's the end of the 90s. You said to me, and I met Ferran one time. One time I met him with Charlie Trotter. But
he's talking about Ferran Adrià,
yes.
Chef of chefs.
What was so incredible was that, of course, you worked for him and you knew him as a friend, as a mentor. And you said, I'm going to be in Barcelona and you can come with me. And I was like, wow. And you take me to Fran and Alberto's, it's kind of like a test kitchen / apartment in the central of Barcelona.
El Taller.
I'd never seen anything like this. There are TV screens, there are computers, there's for that time, very tech savvy kitchen. And here I am. Alberto is more our age. So Alberto, I'm not intimidated. Like we're talking and he's just a very nice guy. And then Ferran comes in. And it's like meeting Diego Maradona, or it's like meeting, I don't even know what LeBron today. I don't even know what you would. And he just speaks 1,000 words in a minute. And you just like, he's translating, but you're also just listening to him. And then the next day we drive up. We first have lunch at Rocas con Faves. So it's basically halfway to Costa Brava. Incredible, rest in peace. Tata Maria, like incredible food. And then the next day, we go and eat lunch at Ferran at El Bulli. It's such a game-changing moment for me. It's like when you talk about mic drop, I don't know, it's like watching, I don't know, the Perfect Prince concert or whatever. I've never had a meal experience like, it's not even a meal, an experience like that. And it shut it down. Like I can never, when someone asks me, what's the best meal, what's the best restaurant? I said, I'm sorry, I experienced it 20 years ago. I don't think I ever will come back to that emotional experience. And it was eating and meeting Ferran Adrià. I had the luxury to have dinner with him here in New York about 5 years ago, something like that. We just went very simple to Pizzeria Marta in here in New York. But it was because of you I met him, and not only meeting him, I saw it. I saw the whole experience. It was I thank you for that because it was game changing.
Well, my friend, it was a joy sharing time with you all these years, and to everybody listening to us. In a moment that seems we're living, in a moment that seems you can only be one thing. You can only be one religion. You can be only one color or one race. Seems that you can only belong to one person, that you can only be one thing and nothing else. I believe, and I wish this could go longer, that listening to a person like Marcus and of the books he's written, I recommend everybody to buy The Rise, a cookbook that is more than a cookbook. It's about race, it's about class, it's about equity, in a belief in the American foodscape. What I want to say is that Marcus is this person that is showing all of us that you can embrace being an African, you can embrace being an European, you can embrace being an American, and all at the same time, and not necessarily one fighting against each other, but making each other better. For that, we need the storytellers. For that, we need translators. Even translators that he may have an accent like I do have, but accents are beautiful because make us listen. And if anything, I'm in awe because Marcus has shown us that you can be all of those things, bringing attention to issues, feeding the few, feeding the many, and in the process, making all of us better. Marcus, always longer tables, my friend. I am proud to tell you that you feel like family. To me, you are family. And from the deepest part of my heart, I love you.
I love you. Thank you so much.